Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and to episode 2 in my watercolor sketchbook series. In the first episode, I was testing out watercolor pencils for the first time, and now in this episode, I'm going to be going through how you can create really beautiful watercolor silhouette paintings step by step. So anyway guys, let's get into it. As always, I am preparing my sketchbook page first with washi tape, and I'm using that to create some nice borders, firstly around the outer edge of the page and also splitting it in half so that I have two nice equal sections to create the paintings with. For the first painting, we are going to be doing a sunset with palm tree silhouettes. So I first started off by pre-wetting the paper, as we are going to be using the wet in wet method. Now I want to create a purple to yellow gradient sunset, so I'm starting off by working my yellow colour through the bottom half of the painting. As the paper is already wet, it will mean that the colours will softly bleed out, leaving no harsh edges, and it will just help to give us a nice soft gradient between the different colours. As you can see, I'm building up the intensity of the yellows by using less and less water so that we have a bit of variety. Now I'm going to start to mix in some reds, so I'm just mixing some intense reds, and I'm going to use that to help break up the yellow and then transition it into the purple. So you can see that I'm working that throughout the middle section of the sunset. So we've got yellow at the bottom, and then we're going to have a pinky orange, and now I'm working purples through the top. But you don't have to use these colours, you can use any colours you want for your sunset. You can see that I'm also going in horizontal motions to give the illusion of clouds, and I'm also working a bit of blue through the top as well, as I like to add lots of different colours to my sunset just to make it more interesting. So I'm also going to build up even more intensity to the yellows now by using less water in my paint, and that is how you get stronger colours, just by using less and less water. I'm also adding some more intense oranges, and you can see that I really am going in horizontal motions to give the look of clouds. It is important to add depth to your painting, so I'm building up some darker colours and shadows to give the look of depth and contrast in my painting. I also wouldn't recommend going too dark with your sunset, otherwise the black silhouettes won't really stand out. Now I'm also going to lift up some of the paint to create some highlighted clouds, and to do this I'm just using a clean damp brush, and this will lift up the paint as long as the paint is still wet. Now that I'm done with the first layer, just let it dry, and then I go in and I pre-wet the whole of that paper again with clean water. And what I want to do is basically soften this out. I don't want those highlights to be so harsh, so I'm going to use the same colours and just add another layer, another gradient, just to soften everything out so the clouds are a bit softer and it's just a bit more subtle. So to do this, I'm working through some darker purples, again going in horizontal lines to give that really nice fluffy cloudy look. You can still lift up some of the paint if you do want to have a few more intense highlights, but I am just going to create a few highlights in my painting. I'm also working some oranges and yellows through the bottom again, and that's it. I'm just going to let this dry, and that's it for my sunset. Now it's time to sketch in the composition for your palm trees. I recommend looking at different references and finding one that you like to help you create some realistic looking trees and palm trees for your sketch. I'm just using a mechanical pencil to loosely sketch these out. I'm not doing loads of detail, just getting in the basic composition and scale of the different palm trees, just so that when I go in with the black paint, I'm more certain of where everything is going to be, because you don't want to go in with your black paint and then realize that you've got something wrong. Now it's time to start working on the silhouettes, so just mix up some black paint. Try not to use too much water, obviously you might need to use a bit to get it to flow better on the paper, and sometimes you'll get a streaky look like you can see here, so I do build it up in multiple layers until I get that really nice matte black result. So as you can see, it looks a lot better now and a lot more just fully blocked in, and there's no streakiness at all. Now it's time to work on the trees, and I start off by blocking in the trunks and then the different leaves of the palm trees. Don't worry about making everything perfect, just have fun. You can see that I'm being quite loose and expressive with this, especially as I'm doing like the bushes. I'm using a stippling motion just so that I get the basic and general idea of what the trees look like and the bushes, but I'm not worrying too much about getting in every single detail. So I just continue to repeat this process for each tree and each bush until I've completely filled in all of my silhouettes. And I do find that this is really fun and relaxing to do, especially painting trees. I love it. I always work with the largest part of the tree first. So I first paint in the main trunk and then all of the main branches and then the tiny little branches that are coming off of the main branches. And then I finally finish it off by painting in any of the foliage. And you can see in this case, sometimes I go horizontally when I paint in the foliage as well, just to have a bit of variety there so not all of the leaves look the same. One tip that I have for you guys when you're painting trees and branches is to try and not have them looking really straight. Try to add curve to your branches and trees because it'll give them a much more natural look. Same as if you're doing leaves on the palm trees, try to give them a little bit of curve because if they're just straight and look very spiky, then it tends to make them not look as realistic. It also makes the painting look more interesting if your trees and branches have got more curve to them. So again, I'm just adding in some more bushes at the bottom, and you can see that in some cases the foliage I'm making a bit more sparse so that you can see more of the tree branches, and other times I want fuller bushes just to have a bit of variety, because if you do everything exactly the same then it can look a bit boring and uniformed, whereas it can look a lot more interesting and really make it look amazing if you add variety not only to the sizes of trees but how full they are and also the curvature of them as well and how much of the tree is showing. For example, you can see that on the right hand side I have some branches that are coming into the shot of the painting, but you can't see the whole of the tree. Once you're happy with your silhouette, look and see if any areas need another layer of the black paint just to make them as dark as they can be, because it can dry a bit lighter than it looks when it's wet, so just have a double check. Now I want to add a little bit of highlight to the sunset, so I'm just mixing up some gouache and I'm adding quite a bit of water just to make it nice and translucent, and I'm just going over some of those highlighted areas just to add more of a fluffy cloudy look to the sky without making them too bright. That's why I added quite a lot of water. And I'm just adding a few of them just to make the sunset a little more interesting. But the more subtle you want them, the more water you need to add. And that finishes off the first painting. As you can see, we've got a lovely, beautiful palm tree silhouette painting, and it wasn't that difficult to do. So now let's move on to our second painting, which is this beautiful stag, moon and shooting star with tree painting. But before we move on, I just want to let you guys know that if you want to see lots of real-time tutorials with voiceover so that you can follow along and learn all of my techniques, not only for watercolor paintings, but also for color pencil, charcoal and other mediums as well, then I have got over 300 real-time tutorials available over on my Patreon. For just a small amount per month, you will get access to all of the tutorials that I have ever uploaded instantly, as well as new tutorials every month so that you can improve your skills and follow along with me. I give you access to the sketch outlines I use, the reference images and my materials list, so you really can follow along with me. If you are interested in that, I'll leave a link in the description. Now let's move on to this second painting, and I'm starting off by again working on the sunset, and this is going to be more of a night sky, so it's going to be a little bit darker. I'm starting off by working some pink through the bottom half of the painting, and again I'm gradually getting more and more intense, so I'm using darker paint. I'm then working some darker blue through the top of the painting, and I'm going to bring that down so that it nicely connects with the pink. I'm then darkening it up even more by using less water in my paint just to give a darker version of that colour. And because I want it to look like a night sky, I really wanted to darken up the pink as well. So I went in with even less water in my pink and just darkened the whole thing up. And I'm bringing that pink up so that it's mixing with the blue to give more of a natural and subtle gradient rather than it being a cut-off point. At the moment, it's very simple and very plain, so I'm going to go in and just add a few horizontal lines to help add more of an interesting look to the sky without making it too overwhelming. I'm just adding a subtle look of clouds to the background. So I'm mixing in some blue into the pink, and then I'm just going to let everything dry so that we can go and work on the sketch. Again, I'm using my mechanical pencil to getting the basic composition of where I want everything to go, just to make it easier when we start to add in the black paint. So it's less likely that we're going to make mistakes. So I'm sketching in where the stag is going to be on top of, the rock, the trees, and also the moon. And make sure that you're happy with your sketch completely before you go in and start to add in the black paint. Now that I'm completely happy with my sketch, I'm going to start off by working on the moon, and I'm going to be using the white gouache that we used before. So I'm starting off by outlining the moon, and this isn't going to be a full moon, it's just going to be a half moon. So I'm starting off by outlining that moon and then adding a bit of water to fade it out because it's not a full moon. So it's going to be brighter on the left hand side and then fade out to the normal night sky look. So to do that, I'm just using more and more water to gradually fade it out. And then I want to start to add more detail to the moon and brighten up the brighter side of the moon that we can see. So to do that, I'm mixing in less water with my gouache to make it brighter. And I'm just adding a few little details using a smaller paintbrush. And again, I'm making sure that the right hand side is completely left of any paint to give that look of a half moon. Now I'm going in and adding in a few little shooting stars. I'm just going to be adding in 4, and I'm first starting off by sketching them out with quite a diluted amount of gouache, and then I go in with some thicker gouache just to really add the highlight at the bottom of the shooting star so that it looks more faded, and then right at the bottom point of the shooting star it is the brightest. And I go and repeat that process for all 4 or 5, I can't remember how many stars I do, but I repeat that process until I'm happy with how everything looks. Next, I'm going to go in and add a few stars to the night sky. And to do this, I am using a flat brush, but you can also use an old toothbrush for this. That will work just as well. And I load that brush up with white gouache. And I recommend having a bit of water in with that because it makes it easier to create this effect. I then just go in with my finger and splatter on that paint, and it gives a really nice natural look of stars that have a bit of variety in sizes as well. I'm then taking that same gouache on my round paintbrush and just using this to add in some clouds, just a really soft, subtle look of clouds, nothing too bright because it is still a night sky, but it's just to help add a bit of interest and texture to the background. So to do this, I'm using very diluted gouache, which means that I've got quite a lot of water in there so that it doesn't dry too bright. And you can still see the different watercolor colours showing through the gouache. Now we're going to go and do the fun part, which is painting the silhouette using black paint, just like we did before. So again, make sure that you're mixing up quite a thick black paint, but just have enough water so that it really nicely flows onto the paper. You can always build up multiple layers if it isn't dark enough. And then once again, I'm going to use the same technique that we did in the first painting to paint in these few trees that we have. But this time they aren't going to have foliage on them. They're going to just be bare trees. So I'm just creating the branches without any real foliage to them. I'm going to repeat the same process for all of the trees, and then we'll be working on the stag. You can see that I'm doing some trees that are slightly taller and some that are more full, and then others that are more like sparse and more like skeleton trees, just to add a bit of variety again and different scales to the trees, because if something looks really uniformed and everything's the same, then it really does sort of detract from the painting, I find. I don't know why, but it does. Now it's time to work on the stag, so again, get your black paint and just fill in your sketch. It should be really easy to do if you've started off with a nice accurate sketch. It really makes the whole process a lot more fun and easy because you don't have to worry about messing anything up because you've already got a really accurate sketch to work inside. It's just colouring in the sketch at this point. And I just completely fill that in, the head and the antlers of the stag. And again, I work on adding multiple layers of paint until everything is nice and dark and there's no streakiness to the black paint. It just looks really matte and as dark as it can be. And then once we've done that, it is finished. So just check over your painting, see if there's any areas that you need to add another layer of black paint to. And also once the gouache is dry, you can check to see if you want to add any more highlights. Like I did, I decided that I needed to add a few more brighter clouds and that I could go in with a bit more of a thicker gouache to add a few more bright highlights. You can then also darken up, for example, around the moon if you want that to stand out more, just using watercolor pencils or even colored pencils to add some final details and tweaks. And once you've done that, we're all done. I'm just removing the tape, and this is my favorite part. I say that all the time, but it's so fun to see the beautiful crisp border of the paintings, and it does look really nice when you have two paintings on a page like this. I think it looks really nice. And the final thing that I like to do with this sketchbook is date all of my paintings so that when I look back, I can remember all of the dates and just look at my journey through the different paintings. So here we have the two final paintings. Let me know in the comments section if you try this out yourself and what you learned from the video. And if you are interested in my Patreon, then I'll leave a link to it in the description. But I really do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're new around here, and even tick that bell icon so you do get notified on my future videos. But that is it from me, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye everybody.